I stood in front of the house I once called home, trembling in the cold of Seattle. When my mother opened the door, she just looked at me and said, "Sorry, you must have the wrong house." Then she shut the door in my face. Not violently, just a firm, final shut, like the sound of a gavel closing a trial that never happened. I stood there, frozen, until my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. "Sophie." Before I could say a word, her voice came through, tilted, half laughing. "She thinks just because she pays rent, that automatically makes her family?" Said nothing, just hung up and opened my banking app. What happened next would leave them speechless. Before we dive deeper, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Leave a comment below so I can see how far this story travels. My name is Emily. I'm 29 years old and currently living in New York, where I work as a finance lead at a major investment firm, in a career I built with my own hands. From long nights working extra shifts, to mornings slurping instant noodles in an apartment the size of a walk-in closet. No privilege, no backing, no family launch pad like some people talk about. Just me and a stubborn will that refused to break. My family lives in Tacoma, a quiet suburb where middle-class families cling tightly to appearances. A two-story house with a porch strung in decorative lights. On the outside, it looked like a peaceful Christmas card. But behind that wooden door was a reality I pretended not to see for years. My mother, Barbara, is the type of woman who posts "family comes first" quotes on Facebook every weekend, then uses that same ideal to guilt her children into submission. She complains constantly about money, about the emotional sacrifice of being a single mom, even though dad is still around, yet somehow never misses her Friday appointments at the upscale nail salon and always has imported wine stocked in the kitchen. My dad, Ken, is quiet, the kind of man who chooses silence over conflict. Even when he sat at the dinner table, he felt more like a shadow, but voiceless. When Mom spoke, he nodded. When Mom decided, he stayed silent. His presence was like the floor, there, but no one noticed. And then there's Sophie, my younger sister, 24. She once studied art in Portland, but dropped out midway to find herself, which, in her case, meant spending 3 years at home, sleeping in until noon, painting a few abstract pieces, and calling herself a soulful artist. Meanwhile, the bills, for electricity, internet, even Dad's arthritis meds, all fell on me. I tried to understand. I used to think, she's young, she'll grow up. But eventually, I realized, when someone always clears the path ahead, no one ever learns how to walk. The bitterest part? While I sent money home every month covering most of the costs to keep that house running, in their eyes I was just the outsider with responsibilities. I wasn't in the family photos Sophie posted on Instagram, not a word in Mom's "so proud of my creative youngest daughter" captions. Not once had my mother ever called me just to ask, "Are you doing okay?" Every call started with, "I know you're busy, but," and ended with a request for a bank transfer. I don't remember exactly when I stopped being seen as a daughter and started becoming the invisible relief machine for the whole family. I was always the easy child, the one who never demanded anything, never talked back, never got my parents called into school for complaints. Since middle school, I knew how to make my own breakfast, study through shouting matches, and pretend not to hear my mother crying in the bedroom. I was also the first to get a part-time job, delivering newspapers, working as a cashier, tutoring, just to buy my own books and help Mom with some school expenses. Meanwhile, Sophie, the so-called pride of the family, grew up wrapped in a perfect little bubble. Every time she switched majors, Mom would post, "Not everyone is brave enough to search for who they truly are. So proud of my baby, girl." And every time Sophie quit something halfway, Mom would whisper to me, "She's sensitive. She needs time. You understand, don't you, Emily?" When my father, Ken, was laid off due to company downsizing, Mom didn't tell the relatives. To the outside world, our family was still fine. The lights stayed on, there was still wine on the table. Sophie still posted check-ins from the local hipster cafe with the caption, "Weekend vibes." But the truth? The one paying the mortgage every month was me. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for anything. I just thought, if I can do it, I should. Then came the electricity bills, Dad's medication, money for Sophie to start her own art project, which really meant renting a studio space she abandoned after 3 months. I sent thousands of dollars with a single tap on a banking app. And then came last Christmas. Mom called me in mid-December, her voice cheerful but vague. "I want this Christmas to be really special, but our budget's looking a little tight." I got the hint. And like always, I agreed to cover everything, from the tree, the lights, the roast, the cookies, to the presents under the tree labeled from Mom and Dad. Thought at the very least, this time I'd be invited to join the celebration. But no. When I asked if I should come home to Tacoma, Mom said, "The house might be a bit crowded, sweetheart. You're busy anyway, right? And besides, Sophie's going through a delicate phase." Instead of reacting, I laughed. I was used to it by now. But when the Christmas photos showed up on Facebook, Mom, Dad, and Sophie standing by the tree I paid for, smiling beside the feast I funded, I wasn't in them. Half joking, half not, I left a comment. "One holding the camera is also the one who paid for everything." The post was deleted 10 minutes later. I called my mother. She said so casually, "You're the giver, sweetheart. Do givers really need to be given to?" That time, I didn't laugh. That was when I started to realize the fine line between being someone who helps and someone who's being used. And in my family, I had crossed that line a long time ago, without even noticing. Another time, on my 28th birthday, there were no wishes, no calls. I tried to brush it off, but then I saw Sophie's Instagram story. She was with Mom, captioned, "Filling the soul with wine and real love." I took a screenshot and sent it to our family group chat with a short message. "Guess you were too busy healing to remember my birthday." No one replied. I still paid the mortgage. Then there was one weekend. I stopped by home unexpectedly, just for a short visit, no announcement. I was standing in the kitchen when I heard my mom talking on the phone with someone in the living room. I was about to call out to her until I heard this. "Emily thinks having money means she can control us, like we're supposed to bow down just because she throws us a few bucks." She laughed. A light, dismissive laugh full of contempt. I turned around, walked to my car, and drove away. No words. I had been wrong. I thought I was helping a family that loved me, but in reality, I was just an interest. Sophie was the daughter, and I was just a resource. And kindness, when unappreciated, quickly becomes a shackle. I used to believe that, no matter what, no matter how overlooked I felt, Christmas would still be the one time I was welcome. Turns out, I was wrong about that too. I had already booked my ticket to Tacoma in early December. I didn't tell anyone, didn't ask for permission. Part of me wanted to surprise them, but mostly I just didn't trust Mom's answers anymore. Every time I asked if I should come home, she had some excuse. "Sophie's in a sensitive place," or "The house is a mess right now, sweetie." But this year, I decided to choose for myself. On the night of December 24th, I stepped out of the Uber, dragging a small suitcase behind me, wrapped in a thick coat, but my heart felt colder than the Seattle wind. The old house looked exactly the same, red and green lights twinkling, a wreath hanging on the front door, and the warm scent of roasted chicken wafting from inside. Through the window, I saw Sophie lounging comfortably on the sofa, grinning with a glass of wine in hand. My dad was pouring drinks, his gaze blank and unfocused. On the table were the turkey, the cookies, and the gift boxes I knew by heart. Because I was the one who paid for them. I rang the doorbell. Once. Twice. My mother's silhouette appeared behind the glass. She opened the door, stood squarely in the doorway, and looked at me as if she had never seen me before in her life. "Sorry, you must have the wrong house." I stood frozen. "Mom, it's me, Emily." "I don't recognize you. Merry Christmas." And then she closed the door. No slamming, no rush, just a soft, deliberate close, like a cold period at the end of a decades-long sentence I had carried for the sake of something we called family. Stood there, stunned, in pain, numb. My hands trembled. Wind slipped through the collar of my coat, but the cold I felt came from within. I stepped back and sat down on the porch steps. I don't know how long I sat there until my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Sophie," I answered, my voice still unsteady. "Sophie." But I didn't get to say anything else. She hadn't hung up properly, and I heard her voice sneering through the line. "She thinks just because she pays rent, she automatically counts as family?" I could hear the clink of glasses, Mom's soft chuckle in the background. I clenched my phone, then hung up. No words, no curse, not in that moment. The pain had gone too deep for tears. I stood up, walked slowly back to the car, but didn't drive off right away. I took out my phone, opened the banking app for the first time in my life not to send money out. My fingers moved across the screen, canceled the automatic rent payments, locked Mom's supplementary credit card, deactivated Sophie's gas and spending cards, removed my name from the shared bank account. Sent an email to the landlord, informing them I would no longer be covering any household expenses starting next month. Each tap felt like closing an old door. Not out of anger, but out of awakening. I used to fear that if I pulled away, the whole family would fall apart. But now I'm not sure that would be such a bad thing. My phone started buzzing nonstop while I was still on the road, leaving Tacoma behind. The screen lit up again and again. Mom's face after message flooded in. Emily, I can't believe you'd do this. Dad needs you to call back. This isn't funny anymore. Sophie is crying. Are you happy now? I didn't respond, but I read every word, and yes, it hurt. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not a single apology. No acknowledgement that they had slammed the door in my face on Christmas Eve. Instead, just a barrage of blame like hammer blows. You're selfish. Family means forgiveness. You've made everyone miserable. I don't recognize you anymore, I began, to doubt myself. Sitting curled up in my tiny New York apartment, the lights from the little Christmas tree I'd decorated myself flickered like a cruel joke. I asked myself, am I the bad one? Did I really betray them? I grew up holding tightly to one belief. If I was good enough, I would be loved. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I took care of myself. I provided. I carried burdens. I was the easy child, so much so that I often couldn't tell if I was still a daughter or just an unpaid maid in a household with endless demands. I remembered my birthday last year. I spent the whole day waiting for a call, a message, just one simple, happy birthday. But nothing came. That night, I finally texted Mom to ask if she was okay. Her reply, I'm tired. Sophie just had a fight with her boyfriend. I'd been comforting her all day. Not a single word about my birthday. Then I remembered the time Mom had a mild stroke and had to be hospitalized for a week. I paid the full hospital bill because their insurance didn't cover everything. I flew back and spent 3 nights in the ICU waiting room, but when Mom was discharged, the family threw a thank you and I wasn't invited. Mom said, Sophie was crying again. I wanted today to be about helping her feel better. Sophie was always the center, even when I was the one holding everything together behind the scenes. And how could I forget the time I canceled my Maldives trip with my friends, the first vacation I had planned for myself after 5 years of nonstop work? Because Sophie called me sobbing, saying her roommate kicked her out. I wired her $2,000, 0 cents immediately so she could get a new apartment. 3 weeks later, I saw a photo of Sophie on Instagram camping in Colorado with her new group of friends. No thank you. Not a single mention of me. Back then, I simply thought, as long as she's okay, that's all that matters. But after this Christmas, I looked back and realized, that wasn't love. That was manipulation wrapped in the language of affection. Each painful memory came flooding back, like my mind was replaying every single time I'd been pushed aside, every time I made excuses for them, every time I said, it's okay while another crack split across my heart, and then something in me woke up. Not because of the guilt-tripping messages, not because I felt sorry, but because, for the first time, I realized the value of silence. I didn't respond. I didn't call back. I didn't explain myself, didn't try to justify things like I always did. I just sat there in the dark of my apartment, hugging a pillow, letting the loneliness wash over me like a freezing tide. But in that cold stillness, I began to feel the faintest glimmer, a tiny flicker of awakening. For the first time in my life, I asked myself a question I should have asked long ago. Who taught me that love means sacrificing all of myself? And why had I lived so long as if that was just the natural order of things? The first week after Christmas, my tiny apartment in New York was quieter than it had ever been. No more midnight phone calls from Mom, no more emergency emails from Dad with subject lines like, urgent. No more long, winding texts from Sophie, starting with, "I know you hate it when I ask, but," there was just me. And the silence. In the mornings, I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching snow cover the rooftops across the street. For the first time in years, I baked cookies. Just for me. Not to ship home. Not to save the cinnamon batch for Sophie because that's her favorite. Just me, and what I wanted to eat. I walked through Central Park, letting the cold air kiss my neck, no longer hearing the ping of bill reminders. I allowed myself to truly live in the moment, not as a tool to serve others, but as someone slowly learning how to love herself. Some mornings I slept in until 10, made pancakes, watched my favorite movie for the 5th time. Some nights I lit candles, played soft jazz, soaked my feet, turned off the Wi-Fi, and finally finished the book I started 3 years ago. The one I'd always meant to read, but never had time for because someone always needed me to send money right away. I began rewriting the rules, this time for myself. Not in a notebook, but in my mind. These were the things no one had ever taught me, so now I had to teach them to myself. I am not obligated to save others just because I can. Love does not mean sacrificing myself unconditionally. Silence is not as terrifying as being silently exploited. I am not an ATM. I am a human being, a person worthy of love with no strings attached. With each passing day, I felt lighter, no longer weighed down by invisible demands, no longer burdened by emotional debts to people who never truly said thank you. I used to think, if I stop, they'll hate me. And they did. But what I didn't expect was, I no longer feared that. I no longer needed to be recognized as part of the family through bank transfers. I didn't need the fake praise that came only when I paid hospital bills, tuition, or covered birthdays on behalf of my mother. I didn't need a spot in the family photo they'd already edited me out of. All I needed was a life that wasn't ruled by guilt, and I was finally living it, for the first time. One evening, I found myself looking through old photos. There I was as a child, in a little Christmas dress, smiling beside the tree. Sophie was next to me, and both my parents were looking at her. No one was looking at me, I laughed, not out of sadness, but because I finally understood. I had spent my entire childhood waiting for that look of love, and I grew up believing that if I was good enough, gave enough, I'd eventually earn it. But now I know. Not everyone who's related to you will love you, and that doesn't make you any less worthy. On the first weekend of the new year, I wrote a single sentence in a brand new journal. I don't belong in places where I have to beg to be seen. I closed the notebook, poured myself another cup of tea, and watched the snow drift gently outside. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I am no longer the person I used to be, and that alone, that simple truth, is enough to make me feel free. On the 3rd morning after Christmas, my doorbell rang, violently. Not the hesitant kind of ring. It was urgent, aggressive, almost defiant. I looked through the peephole, and I didn't have to guess. My mother, my father, Sophie, standing right there outside my small Manhattan apartment, the place they'd always referred to vaguely as where Emily lives, somewhere in New York. Mom knocked harder, her voice trembling but clear. "Emily, open the door. We need to talk. We're family, sweetheart." Dad stood a bit behind her, arms crossed, his face stiff, his eyes burning with thinly veiled anger. And Sophie, as always, leaned against the hallway railing, phone in hand, lips curled in that familiar smirk. Still playing the victim, I see. I took a deep breath, then unlatched the door, but I didn't open it all the way. I cracked it just enough so they could hear me. Family doesn't shut the door on Christmas Eve and show up days later like nothing ever happened. Mom blinked, and tears immediately welled up like she had a switch for them. "I didn't have a choice. We didn't know you were coming. You scared us." "Scared?" I scoffed. "Your daughter knocks on the door on Christmas Eve and that terrifies you?" Dad cut in, his voice low but tight with control. "You went too far. You cut off everything. We almost lost the house. Sophie had to get a job at a convenience store. Do you know how much that humiliated your mother?" I leaned against the doorframe, calm but steady. "It's funny how clearly you remember what I stopped doing. But no one ever mentions everything I did before that." Sophie snapped like a firecracker, voice sharp and biting. You just love playing the martyr, don't you? Like your money saved the whole damn universe. But all you ever wanted was control. I looked at her, my sister, who once cried over needing $200, 0 cents for rent, who used to call me at 3 a.m., begging for help, now standing there, judging me like I was some manipulative opportunist. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo I had accidentally recorded on Christmas Eve, the one where Sophie hadn't properly hung up, and I hit play. She thinks just because she pays rent she automatically counts as family? Silence complete. Sophie's face turned pale. Mom stepped back. Dad turned to look at his youngest daughter, his eyes beginning to redden. I kept my voice calm. I don't blame you for not loving me. I blame you for pretending you did. Emily, Mom stammered, you misunderstood. Sophie she was upset. She didn't mean what she said. I cut her off. No, Mom, that's exactly what you all think. When I give, it's family love to you. When I stop, it's ungrateful. You erased me from my own home, so don't stand outside mine and pretend nothing happened. Dad's voice tightened, loud and sharp for the first time. You're destroying everything. You're tearing this family apart. I turned to him, my gaze no longer trembling like before. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just taking back what was never appreciated. You're selfish, Mom whispered, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. No, I'm just done being the fool. Sophie was still saying something, but I didn't catch the words. The sound of the door closing, this time, was mine. And unlike the cold shut of Christmas Eve, this one was deliberate, empowered. I locked the bolt, resting my forehead gently against the cold wood. They could fly thousands of miles to get here. They could cry, rage, mock, but they couldn't re-enter my life using the same tricks they always had, because I was awake now. And this time, I wasn't going back. They stood there, still, outside my apartment after I shut the door. No one left. Mom kept knocking softly, as if hoping I'd cool down. Dad sighed over and over. And Sophie? I no longer cared about the look on her face. I didn't throw them out, but I didn't let them in either. I simply left them exactly where they once placed me, on the outside. After a few minutes, Mom spoke again, her voice trembling but softer now, like she was reaching for a familiar script. Emily, we're family. Families have rough patches, but no one turns their back forever. I opened the door again, this time fully, and looked straight at her. No anger, no tears, just a 29-year-old woman, exhausted from loving the wrong way for too long. You're right, Mom, families can argue, but families don't pretend they don't recognize their daughter on their doorstep. I panicked. I didn't recognize you. Recognized me, I cut in. You recognized me perfectly. But you didn't want to face the guilt, and instead of apologizing, you chose to erase me from the celebration. Stepped in, his tone less sharp now, but still firm. Sweetheart, people make mistakes, but we can fix them, as long as you come back. I let out a small laugh, bitter, sharp, like a paper cut across a healing wound. No, Dad, you don't want to fix anything. You just want me to start paying again. The silence that followed was so thick I could hear the wind whistling through the hallway. Sophie turned away, silent, maybe because she knew that if she opened her mouth, I'd hit play on the recording again. Mom stepped closer, her voice softening, slipping back into the role she knew so well. Emily, we're family, sweetheart. Blood doesn't turn its back. I looked her straight in the eyes, the woman who gave birth to me, who raised me, yet still didn't see me as a person, only as a walking balance sheet. I'm not family, I said, each word sharp as a blade. I'm a financial plan. Sophie shook her head, hissing, You're cruel. You're destroying everything. No, Sophie. I turned to her. You and Mom destroyed everything. I just finally stopped holding up the rubble. Dad stepped forward, and for the first time his voice trembled, not with anger but uncertainty. Then, what do you want? What can we do for you to forgive us? I was quiet for a moment. Then I answered, as honestly as I ever had. I don't want anything. No apologies, no reparations. I just want all of you to disappear from my life, at least until you've learned how to treat another human being with respect, not just as a wallet. Mom started crying again, but her tears no longer touched me. I stood there, staring at the 3 people I once loved so deeply I nearly destroyed myself for them. But now only one truth remained. I had awakened, and they no longer had the power to define me. I stepped back, and this time, I closed the door not out of anger, but because I finally saw everything clearly. No shouting, no pleading to be understood. No need to prove anything. The door shut, softly, decisively. And to me, it sounded like the final curtain falling on a stage where I had played the lead for nearly 3 decades. I removed the key from my ring and dropped it into the small mailbox outside beneath the label that read, "Returning what no longer belongs to me." In that moment, I felt a strange lightness. Not because I'd done something painful, but because I had finally chosen myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hoping they would change. I just needed them out of my mind. And the cruelty they accused me of? Maybe it was simply the boundary I should have drawn a long time ago. 1 month after that final confrontation, I woke up to a stillness so pure it almost startled me. No phone ringing, no late-night texts, no one asking me to help just one more time, just soft sunlight spilling through the window of my tiny apartment, brushing the old wooden floor, and the quiet warmth of a life that finally belonged to me. I brewed coffee, put on soft music, and prepared for the weekend like it was any other ordinary day. But then my phone buzzed. A new message, from a familiar number I no longer had saved. "Emily, it's Mom. We've lost everything. Your father and I are fighting constantly. Sophie's working at a supermarket. Your dad blames me. I'm sorry. Please come home. I really mean it this time." I stared at the message for a long while. Not angry, not bitter, just silent. Then I hit delete. Not because I wanted to erase my mother from my life, but because there was nothing left I needed to hold on to. I walked over to my bookshelf and pulled out an old photo album wedged behind stacks of financial documents and rental agreements. I hadn't touched it in years. The first page held a photo of me, 9 years old in a wrinkled red dress, standing by the Christmas tree. Next to me was Sophie, chubby-cheeked, held in Mom's arms. Dad was crouched, arranging presents under the tree. In the frame, everyone looked at each other except me. I looked straight at the camera, smiling brightly, as if I truly believed I was right where I belonged. I flipped through more pages. My 16th birthday. I lit my own candles while Mom cooked, Dad watched TV, and Sophie cried because she couldn't cut the cake first. Graduation. I stood in my green gown, holding a diploma. No one was in the photo with me. The family had gotten stuck in traffic. I sat down, viewing those memories like an outsider. No more pain, no more longing, just a chapter of the past I had finally walked beyond. I closed the album and placed it back on the highest shelf, where it belonged. A chapter closed, not torn out, but no longer relived. Outside, snow had begun to fall. I put on my coat, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and stepped out into the street. The air was crisp, but my heart felt strangely warm. Not because someone loved me more, but because, for the first time, I no longer felt like I had to earn love to be worthy of it. I walked through the park. Snow blanketed the pathways. Trees stood bare as if shedding old burdens. People say winter is a season of decay, but to me it felt like cleansing. Cold yet necessary, still yet purifying. Each step I took felt like shedding an old chain. No more duty disguised as affection. No more identity tied to usefulness. No more asking myself, have I been good enough? For so long I wondered why I wasn't loved like Sophie, praised like her, favored like her. But now I know, real love doesn't require performance. It comes from those who see your worth, even when you give them nothing in return. I no longer blame my mother, my father, or Sophie. Each of them lived the only way they knew how, but I had spent too long seeking approval from people who never learned how to love. Now I don't need their forgiveness. I need to forgive myself. Forgive myself for waiting too long, for forgetting who I was, for confusing love with endurance. New York's winter air was sharp but bright. I stopped in the middle of a soft bed of snow, lifted my face to the silver sky and smiled, for the first time, not because someone needed me, but because I chose myself. I'm no longer Emily, the one who holds it all together. I'm just Emily, a whole, independent woman, and finally truly free. If you've ever sacrificed your peace just to make someone else comfortable, please remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's how we learn to love ourselves the right way. And if this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, used, or pushed aside in your own home, know this: you are not alone, and you deserve more. Don't forget to like this video if you felt seen, share it with someone who might need a wake-up call, and hit subscribe so you never miss another deeply human story, where together we heal, grow, and rise for the lives we deserve. Thank you for watching to the end. I'll see you in the next video.